Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today, Jay Shetty. If you haven't already heard of Jay Shetty, he's got the largest performing podcast in health and wellness. And I'm just really happy to be introducing this today. We're talking about Jay's new book, Think Like a Monk, which I think could not come at a better time. So let me give a brief introduction of Jay, if you don't already know who he is. Jay Shetty is a storyteller, podcaster, and former monk. His vision is to make wisdom go viral. He's on a mission to share the timeless wisdom of the world in an accessible, relevant, and practical way. And he's created over 400 viral videos with over 5 billion views and hosts the #1 health and wellness podcast in the world called On Purpose. Jay Shetty grew up in a family where you could be one of three things: a doctor, a lawyer, or a monk. And I'm really excited to hear about your trip to India and how that started.
A doctor, a lawyer, or a failure.
Yes, sorry.
Doctor.
My correction. A doctor, a lawyer, or a failure. You chose monk, which in their eyes at the time seemed like the third option, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm just so grateful to see you both. Thank you so much for this opportunity. You know, we've been such great fans. My community absolutely loves your work. And yeah, I'm so deeply happy to be with you today. And yeah, you're right. That was the three options that I felt I grew up with, to the point that I actually didn't know there were any other careers in the world. Like, I didn't realize that you could be a TV presenter or a news anchor or a journalist or I don't know, anything else. Like, I literally thought, and I would probably add, I knew that accountants existed and engineers, but beyond that, I wasn't really aware that there were any different paths. And I only got exposed to that different path when I met a monk. And that's one of the biggest reasons that I wrote this book, is really to ask people the question, like, who's going to be the monk in your life? It might not be a monk, but what is that idea in your life that's going to change the trajectory and the path that you take? You may not meet a monk. It may not be an external of a monk, but what is that idea in your life that's going to spark a whole new set of values, beliefs, and transformations that can lead you to it? So that's
it's time. And Jay, I've been looking forward to this podcast so much. I've loved the ones you and I've done. But now we get to interview you. And this is really a historically crazy time. The incidence of anxiety, of depression, of grief, loss, addiction is just skyrocketing. And I think in large part because people don't have those mentors and they don't have a discipline on how to take care of their minds. And so can you just talk a little bit about how you got into this? And I really want to spend most of this group of podcasts talking about what are the practical things you learned that can help so many people that are suffering now.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So for me, I got exposed to it and learning about this. I was born and raised in London. And when I was growing up in London, I was aspiring to achieve everything that any 18-year-old would do: a good job, a good partner, a good life, good friends, and just hoping and chasing the same sorts of forms of success that everyone would. But for me, all of that dramatically changed when I was invited to hear a monk speak. Now, I loved hearing thought leaders and celebrities and entrepreneurs and athletes. I used to love going to hear them speak and learning about these rags to riches stories. But then when I was invited to hear a monk speak, I thought, what am I going to learn from a monk? Like, what can you learn from monks? They just sit there all day. Like, I don't want to learn how to sit still. Like, there must, what am I going to learn from a monk? And it was almost like this ironic, I had this negativity or some sort of dismissiveness towards what I could learn from a monk. And so I went to this event, and my words to my friends were literally this, that I will only go to this event if we go to a bar afterwards. I was 18 years old, growing up in London. And just to give you context of, I didn't come from a spiritual or a religious background. I wasn't coming from a place of wanting to do something good in the world. I was just wanting to do what every other kid at 18 wanted to do. And I went to this event, and it's almost like the irony of the universe and how it works, that I come expecting nothing and I walk away with everything that goes on to become my life. And the reason is in hindsight now, when I look back, when I was 18 years old, I'd met people who were rich. I'd met people who were beautiful and attractive. I'd met people who were strong and powerful and athletic and all of these things, and knowledgeable and intellectual. But I don't think I'd ever met anyone who was truly happy. And I think if people even did an audit in their own lives of how many people do they have in their life that they would believe are truly content and happy, I think most of us would struggle to think of that many people. And so at 18, when I was exposed to someone who was speaking about how the greatest thing we can do with our gifts and talents is to use them in the service of others, when I was introduced to that concept at 18, it just kind of like grabbed hold of my consciousness and made me want to understand what that truly meant. So that's how I got introduced to learning about this. And what I went on to learn and understand is that it wasn't just that monk. There were other monks, and I mean, you're the brain expert, so you can tell me which monks' brains you've scanned. But when you look at the brain scans of monks' brains, they appear to be the calmest, happiest, most compassionate brains on the planet. And today, one of the biggest challenges we're seeing in the world is a lack of compassion and understanding, which I really believe is at the heart of the solution of what we're looking for.
I love that. And so you talked about the irony of the universe. And so your new book, Think Like a Monk, which comes out in September, I know how long it takes to write a book. And so I know you weren't thinking about what's going to be happening right now when you planned this book. So that's what's really interesting to me, because I have a similar situation happening. My book is going to be released. It's called The Relentless Courage of a Scared Child. And it's just weird timing. And I don't believe in coincidence, right? So it's interesting how it happened. But what I love about your book is it's coming out at a time when it's just people are really, really searching and seeking. They're scared and they need peace. And I'm a person who finds myself pretty solution oriented, and I'm still triggered. So what do you say to people who get triggered, even if they think of themselves as having tools? What do you say to people? How are you helping people to find peace and calm during this time that's pretty threatening?
So you're going to use this as a therapy session?
Because I know our listeners, I see their emails, I see their messages.
Jay, help me so much.
Yes, but our people are feeling the same thing. I mean, it's touching a nerve. Your timing could not be more perfect.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. That means a lot. And you're spot on that, first of all, I think it's important to state that the situation that we're all currently faced with is a very extreme situation, in the sense that what's happening in the world today, we can't say, oh, this happens all the time. And we are all experiencing that. So it's almost like the test is much harder than our training. And so a lot of the tools that we've had up until now and the training that we've had up until now were okay for the kind of tests we were dealing with. And all of a sudden, the test is just like skyrocketed. And then we're fumbling around with these tools and the training that we had. And what to speak of people who didn't even have the opportunity to have the tools and the training.
Yeah.
So really, my heart's in a very empathetic point where I'm just like feeling the pain that people are feeling. And wanting to be of service, but first recognizing that no one should judge themselves, or no one should be feeling that pressure on themselves for not knowing what tools to use, because this was a test that no one was trained for. And so that's the first step. The second is, one of the things that we make is when we think we have the tool, we train less. And this is the difference between knowing and action. When you think you kind of know what's going on, you prepare less, and therefore your action has less power and less strength. And so one of the things that I think is really important for us right now is that when we look at our triggers, whether they're the news, whether they're social media, whether it's that chat group that you're on with your family and people keep sending updates, whatever it is that is giving you that sense of stress and pressure, we do need immersive parts of our day in silence and stillness away from those triggers. And
when you do that, you do better.
I do. So if
when
I turn,
you do that, you.
So you heard him say
so
you have
better.
to not judge yourself. I think he means spouses too. But I accidentally turn the news. I can't watch the news. I start screaming at the TV, and it happens so quickly. And I know better, but I turned it on by accident and I got busy and didn't change the station because I know. And within 5 minutes, I'm in his office yelling. Like,
the world is falling apart.
Yeah, but, and it freaks me out.
So it's a historic time. Although
I love what you said.
Throughout history, like you lived in London, right? In the 16th century, the plague visited London virtually every year. And even earlier than that, you never knew if you were going to wake up and some Viking raider from Scandinavia was going to slit your throat. So we have, we've experienced this. And you say something in the Relentless Courage that I love, is you can't just show up on fight day.
You have to train every day.
You have to train every day. And that's what I'm hearing you say. And when you, people listening, pointing to Tana, when you meditate, and when you take time for quiet and stillness, you're a radically different person.
Totally different.
You know, when we give you the tools, it's not like you do them once and expect miraculously the depression goes away. It's exercise. A practice. Like I'm going to see an Olympic athlete next week that I'm really excited about. And he didn't become that way by like training once.
No.
It's repeated
like brushing your teeth
over and over and over again. How did you learn that practice as a monk? What was the training like?
Yeah, I was actually speaking to one of my monk friends the other day, and this example that you're mentioning, he was quoting Michelangelo, who was asked, how did he create these incredible sculptures? And how did he create these incredible designs? And he would say that the design is already there. I just have to chisel around it. And it's that daily chiseling that we're all doing with our minds and our brains and our bodies that needs to be done to excavate, to discover what's already there. And so it's a chiseling process. It's a daily process. If you paint one day and never paint again, there's a beautiful story that I love sharing that I talk about in the book. It's a allegory that was created years ago around the life of Picasso. And so this woman sees Picasso in a marketplace and she walks up to Picasso and she said, Picasso, can you draw me a portrait? And he says, sure, I'll draw you a portrait. He whips out a pen and paper and in 30 seconds, he paints an identical portrait of this lady. Handing it back to her, he says, that will be $30,000. She said, Picasso, how can that cost $30,000? It took you 30 seconds.
Right.
He said, it took me 30 years to be able to do that in 30 seconds. And obviously it's not a true story. It's a story with a message. But the point being that it's that 30 years of practice. So in our lives, our daily practice was waking up at 4 a.m. every single day. Wow. The reason for rising early was not to create pain. The reason for rising early was that there was less traffic in your mind.
Yes.
So if you look at the traffic on the road, if I'm trying to drive to your home at this time when we're nearly approaching noon right now when we're recording, the traffic is nearly growing to its highest point. As it goes later in the day, the traffic gets worse and worse. But if I'm driving at 4 a.m. from where I am in Hollywood to Marina Del Rey or San Diego or wherever it is, I'll get there quicker. So the access point to calm your mind in the morning is much more prominent than it will be as the day gets busier. So that's one thing. We started our collective meditations at 4:30 till about 5:15. And from 5:15 to 7:15 was our individual meditations. From 7:15 till 8 was again collective meditations. And 8 to 9 was a class, kind of like this, like a discussion and a Q&A and a conversation about these themes. Then from 9 a.m. onwards, after breakfast, our days were different. But the point was, every day you started by putting on your armor. Mm-hmm. You started by putting on your shield. You started by, what you said, you don't just show up on fight day, Tana, in your book that, Daniel was just mentioning. That's such a beautiful way to think about it because you don't even start the day before you put on your shield. And so half our day was self and the other half was service. And today in a lot of our lives, we're trying to spend a lot of our time trying to help people, but we haven't yet put our own shield on. We haven't yet put on our own armor, and therefore we get wounded very easily.
I love this. I'm finding so many parallels to what you're saying, which is really interesting because I'm a fighter and you're a lover, obviously. You're a monk and I'm a martial artist, but martial arts actually has roots in meditation and being able to still your mind. And
for sure. Yeah.
So I've got a black belt in Taekwondo and a second degree black belt in Kempo, and people will often say to me, well, like, that's so hard. Like, you must be so tough. And I'm like, I'm really not. I mean, I'm 120 pounds. I'm really not a tough person. But we have a saying that I love, black belt is just a white belt who shows up every day.
Yeah.
It's like, I just showed up long enough. Like, they finally put a belt on you, right? Because you train long enough. And you had so many parallels to how we train. Like, and I used to get up at 4:00 every morning. I sort of figured that out intuitively when I was a teenager, which is weird for a teenager. But I was super anxious. And so I used to go to the gym. I would get up really early because no one else was awake yet. And all the stuff couldn't start. People couldn't bother me. So I could go to the gym and get it done and then just start my day right. And so that time in the morning that is yours, to exercise, to pray, to meditate, to really get your day started before everybody needs your time, before everybody is interfering with what you're doing, is so important. I love what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I fully agree with you. I love that, your background in martial arts, because if you look at the Shaolin monks who are known to perform incredible feats, and I write about them in the book, if you look at their ability doesn't come from strength or just dealing with pain. It comes from mind control. Yep. So when they looked at some studies, when they placed and Daniel will know far more about this than I do, but here I go trying to explain something to an expert. They had a plate almost like this that would gradually heat up on monks and non-meditators. And they found that when a non-meditator touched the plate and it gradually heated up, they would start to see physical pain in the brain, but also emotional and mental pain in the brain attached to that physical pain. Whereas when they looked at the monks' scans, they found that there was only a physical trigger in pain, but no emotional and mental pain attached to that physical pain. And so similarly in martial arts, it's so much more about discipline. Yes. And there's a beautiful story I'm sure you've told. It's one of these old tales that I love telling. It's a martial arts story. And it's the story of a young karate kid who wants to be a karate kid and goes up to his sensei and says, I really want to learn karate in self-defense because I don't have a left arm, because he's lost his left arm. And the sensei says to him, sure, come back here tomorrow and we'll start training. They start training, and for the first 7 days, they do the same thing every day. And the karate kid's going, what am I learning every day, the same thing, and keep paying this sensei? He doesn't say anything, and then they do the same thing again for the next week. And the next week. And then after a month, the kid comes up to the sensei and says, we've learned the same thing every day. How is this helpful to me? And the sensei says, well, you're ready for a tournament. And the kid's feeling completely insecure, going, how am I going to be useful in this tournament? They go to the karate tournament. The kid without a left arm is in the tournament. They start fighting. And the kid now forgets all of his training and just tried to use his mind to manipulate the situation. And he loses every time. And he says, look, I'm losing. You haven't taught me enough. We've just been doing the same thing. And the sensei says, just do the thing I taught you. Just do that one thing. So he does that in the next game and he wins. He does it in the next one and he wins. He does it in the next one and he wins. And so he goes up to the teacher afterwards, the sensei, and perplexed. He says, how is it that I am winning when I was losing in the beginning? And the sensei says, because if anyone wants to counteract that one move, they'd have to grab hold of your left hand.
Oh, I love it.
And you don't have one. So I taught you the only move that no one can counter.
I love it.
And it's a beautiful story that I love sharing because it reminds us that sometimes in meditation or in our good habits, it's like Dr. Tana Amen will keep saying every day, take this, do this, take this. You said the same thing every day. But the funny thing is, it's the day that you don't do it that you feel the lack. And sometimes that's how we learn if habits are good for us. I know the difference when, like, we all eat every day. You feel the difference when you don't eat.
Yes.
You don't notice it when you're eating every day. When you eat every day, you feel full every day and you don't realize what that sensation feels like. But if you skip a meal or you skip a day of eating, you will feel different. And that's what good habits are like. You only feel their benefit when you stop doing them.
Yeah. And likewise, for those of us that eat really clean, when you don't eat clean, you feel it. We had to practice in our house. We practiced gratitude when this pandemic first hit and we were out of town. I came home and I'm a sort of a prepper. So I had lots of stuff here, but I went to the store and all the stuff I would normally get was not there. So it's like, all right, well, we're eating bread and rice, I guess, because we don't normally eat that, right? So it's amazing how your gluten allergy, suddenly you're like, well, I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting because I really didn't feel like myself. Like I was very grateful. And we talked a lot about it in our house. It's like, wartime rules are different than peacetime rules. You just do things differently. And so we're going to be grateful for what we have. We have plenty. So we're going to be focusing on that. But I felt it. And so when I was able to get back to my normal routine, I really felt good. Like I was really grateful for that. Yeah. So I really like what you're saying about that.
At Amen Clinics, we're creating a revolution in psychiatry. All other medical specialists look at the organ they treat before they treat it, but most psychiatrists never look and end up guessing based on whatever symptoms you tell them. But how do you know unless you look? Brain SPECT imaging gives us a new way to look at your brain to understand and treat your symptoms so you can ultimately know what is going on and feel better.
So in the time we have left, you have so much experience.
I know, this is so good.
And you have interviewed so many wonderful people. I love our Brain Warriors audience so much. What are the most practical tools that you can give them? I know a lot of people, when they think meditation, they're like,
they're overwhelmed.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
Even though, like, one of my favorite meditations is a loving kindness meditation. I mean, you can do it in 4 minutes, and it just, where you bring your focus always determines how you feel. But if you could just download for us when you're thinking of, so what are the most practical things that you've learned that they can learn in your book, but also by listening to us
especially if
today?
they're not familiar with meditating.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of my favorite. So yeah, I want to get super practical, and I love that. So the first lesson I'd say is that, and I talk about it in the book, and there's a whole chapter dedicated to this, is location has energy and time has memory. And what I mean by that is when you do something in the same space every day, it creates an energy in that space. When you do something at the same time every day, you create a memory in your mind where it becomes easier. So let's talk about location first. One of the biggest challenges we make in our homes is that we do everything in every location. We eat in our bedrooms, we work in our kitchens, and we sleep on our couches, right? We have 3 places for those things. We're meant to sleep in our bedrooms. We're meant to work potentially on our couches right now in lockdown. And we're meant to eat in our kitchens or our dining areas. There's a reason why homes and feng shui and vastu, which is in the Vedic tradition, the word for feng shui, there's a reason why environments are designed to create certain emotions and energy in your body. And so the first thing I would do, which is so practical for everyone, please start only sleeping in your bedroom, or being intimate with your partner, of course, but sleeping in your bedroom. When you're at the kitchen or the dining table, remove laptops, remove phones, remove any work devices, and use it to simply eat and connect. When you're in the lounge, currently, I know that our whole space is mixed up. I remember living in a 500 square foot apartment with my wife in New York. We had just corners for everything because we didn't have rooms or spaces, but we had a meditation corner. We had an entertainment corner. We had an eating corner, and we had a working corner. Even if all you have is 4 corners, if you start to allow your mind to compartmentalize in your space, you'll feel such a sense of freedom, because now when you walk into your bedroom and all you do is sleep there, you naturally feel like you want to sleep. When you walk into your kitchen, you'll naturally want to eat and entertain and be together. So that's the first thing that I think is so important. And that works with time. When you do something at the same time every day, it becomes easier. The more you can regulate your eating habits, your sleeping habits, of course. And, I'm sure, Daniel, you've spoken about these before, but location has energy and time has memory. So that's the first practical thing that you can start today. Stop doing everything everywhere. Okay. Second one is something that I call the 3 S's: sights, sense, and sounds. Sights, sense, and sounds have a remarkable ability to transform how we feel. And usually we're exposing ourselves subconsciously to sight, sense, and sounds, not intentionally. So let's start with sights. I would ask everyone who's listening and watching right now to say, what's the first thing you see when you wake up in the morning? Might be the ceiling, might be your phone, but I promise you it's probably not that intentional. What if the first thing you saw in the morning was a work of art that inspired you? What if it was a quote that gave you courage and hope? What if it was a picture of a loved one that enlivened you and brought gratitude in your heart? Imagine the first thing you saw in the morning was what you intentionally wanted to see for the feeling you knew that it gave you. Mm-hmm. For me, I love waking up to wisdom. I love having a quote that's the top of my mind that I'll put there that will just be my intention. You can stick it on a sticky note on your ceiling, on the side of your desk. Because guess what? When the first thing you see in the morning is your phone, you're now allowing 100 messages to define what goes on in your mind. And the way I like to compare this is, would you let 100 people walk into your bedroom before you've got dressed, ready, and clean? None of us would. You would never let that happen, right? You'd have to put your makeup on, you'd have to put your clothes on, you'd have to do your hair, you'd have to brush your teeth. Why are you letting
your armors on before you
Why are you letting 100 people walk into your mind? And I think it's a Gandhi quote where he would say that I would never let someone walk through my mind with their dirty feet. And you're letting your mind just open up to not dirt necessarily, but definitely complexity. So that's the first thing. What are you seeing first thing in the morning? Make it really intentional. The second one is sound. The reason why sound fascinates me is when I lived in New York, I found that I would wake up, I'd put my arm on, and then by the end of the day, I was exhausted. And I was thinking, why is this happening? And I was really looking into it. And I discovered something which, Daniel, you probably know, again, a lot more about, but I discovered cognitive load. And I found that my sound, my ears were having to process 80% insignificant sound. The sound of drilling, the sound of construction, the sound of cars honking, the sound of cars driving. My mind and my brain were trying to make sense of insignificant sound. So I was being drained by stuff that was insignificant. So for you, when you're working, what is a sound that you can put on? What is a song that you can put on that you want to hear when you're in the kitchen cooking? What is the song or the music or the sound accompaniment that you want while you're working? Or do you want silence? Silence is also a sound. I'm someone who loves to work in silence or even drive in silence. My wife loves driving to music. And the beauty is that if you surround sound your environment with sounds that uplift you, it will change your life. So when we were monks, we would wake up to natural sounds like water and bird. Yeah. When we would go to sleep, you'd go to sleep to the sound of water again, or you'd go to sleep to the sound of just stillness and silence. So we have to sound design our lives to gain the emotion. How many times do you feel happy when you hear a song from your past? Or how many times do you feel angry when you hear a song which is like metal or heavy metal?
Sorry about that. But, I just made a connection that I'd never thought of before. Because when you're in New York, we have a clinic in Manhattan that you also hear sirens all day long. And probably nobody's thinking about the fact that when you hear a siren, your limbic brain or your emotional brain connects that to trauma, stress, and tragedy. And so while you were there, part of the cognitive load is this sadness and this fear that is assaulting you on a regular basis. And that's why after 3 days in New York, I'm totally ready to go. I love my people in New York. I love my clinic in New York. But the brain works through association
Yes.
So what are you associating to the environment that you're in? This is so good.
It really
This is really helpful.
And going back to what Tana said and what Daniel, what you've just said now, when we're watching the news, there's also a lot of sirens. So, like, you know, when you're watching the news, there's a lot of that, the trauma that's seeking in.
You're getting triggered from your past.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so that's sound. And also, you know, one of the things that I really believe in changing. So I've been fortunate enough to train my body to wake up after 8 hours of sleep, no matter what time I sleep.
Right.
So I don't wake up to an alarm, but I don't like the word alarm. Why would you want to wake up to an alarm? It makes zero sense. Like, I'm like, shocking yourself into being awake sounds like the worst energy to wake up in. So what I would recommend to people with sound is change your alarm to not be alarming. Like, why would you want to wake up to a shock? And a lot of people's alarm tones are so shocking and so jolting that you wake up in a state of shock. And the final one is scent. There's a reason why we love going to a spa or for a massage. And it could be just a room, but when someone has lit a candle or a scent that has eucalyptus or lavender or sandalwood, those have natural calming effects when they're breathed in. Mm-hmm. And so when we breathe in scent, so you may say, when I start my work day, I'm going to have a candle. I'm just going to light this candle. I'm just going to breathe for a second with my candle. Or I'm going to put on a diffuser. My wife's amazing with diffusing and essential oils. And every room in our home has a different diffuser and a different essential oil. And so when I walk into that room, I feel a new sense of freshness. And if you're saying, Jay, I have a small home, you can do that in your environment, whatever it may be. And so having a diffuser, having an essential oil, having a, you know, even in the shower these days in the morning, I have a little bottle of eucalyptus and I'll just put a few tips in it into the hot water, and that just fills it in. And it's like, it's almost like having a personal steam in your own home. And just those simple habits can start using your environment to transform how you feel as triggers.
So
those are so good. And they resonate so much. I had a mentor say to me one time, I was having a hard time learning how to meditate. So I started off with guided imagery because I couldn't quiet my mind. And now I love meditation and quieting my mind, but it wasn't easy for me. And so I had a mentor tell me, put a chair in your closet. And it didn't occur to me why at the time, your closet or your third car garage. And I was like, what? Why? I don't understand. And now it makes sense to me because I don't spend time there doing other things. That's why. And for me, earplugs, because I get distracted by outside noise. So for me, I use earplugs.
Yeah.
We treat a lot of people who have ADD of one form or another. And they always say, I can't meditate.
Because they think they have to think of nothing.
What would you say?
Yeah. I would say that, first of all, everything I've just shared is in itself a meditation.
Right.
And so whether you're breathing in the scent of the candle, whether you're focusing in on the sound, whether you're being present with the sight, it's the presence of mind that is meditation, being present with our body, being present with our minds, being present with the thought. And I would say to anyone that exactly what Tana said, the challenge is that we have all these misconceptions around meditation, which people think meditation means I have to have my mind to be empty. None of us can have an empty mind. We can have a redirected mind.
Yes.
But we can't have a mind. If you try to empty your mind will just reject it. And so instead of creating rejection, you want to create redirection. And that only comes from having a point of focus. So what I would say to people is there are 3 types of meditation. There's breath work, there's visualization, and there's mantra or sound. Practice all 3 of them. I talk about the monk method and Think Like a Monk, where I give examples of each, and see which one resonates with you the best. I've been teaching meditation for the last 15 years, and I've seen certain people who just benefit greatly from breath work. I've seen certain people that are visual thinkers that find their greatest source of growth when they're visualizing. And I've seen people who've gone so deep that mantra and repetition of sacred sound allows them to completely block out any of the noise. But my recommendation to people is do it in an immersive way. If you can take out an hour to really go deep with someone, either a coach, an app, a friend who meditates, a class online, whatever it may be. When the lockdown started, I did 40 days of live meditation on Instagram and Facebook. And we had 20 million people join over 40 days. And 90% of those people said that they'd never meditated before.
Fantastic.
It was amazing. And we just did 15, 20 minutes a day. And it was just incredible to see it. So my recommendation would be find some breathwork exercises, find some visualization exercises, find some mantra exercises, do them all, just put your mind to it and see which one feels the most natural to you, because not everyone's going to gravitate towards the same one.
Are you looking for ways to heal ADD, enhance your memory, conquer anxiety, depression, insomnia, autism, and other conditions? Hi, I'm Dr. Tana Amen. We provide courses based on what we've learned over 30 years of clinical practice. We also offer accredited courses geared to physicians, therapists, and students looking to get ahead. Are you ready to change your brain and change your life? Get started today.
What about moving meditations? The reason I ask this is because I tried to do yoga, and I honestly, it's not that I can't, and I actually do like the way I feel physically afterwards, but my mind, I tend to be a pretty high-strung person. So the thing I love, about martial arts is I know people think it's crazy. They think it's crazy that you can think of it as a meditation when you're hitting stuff. But honestly, I'm so present. Because you have to be present when someone's about to hit you. So you have to be present when you're blocking things. Plus, you are using mantras. When you do katas, it's a mantra. It's a moving meditation. You have to be very present and very focused. Yeah. What do you think about moving meditations?
Yeah, I love the idea of course, yoga and martial arts. And you've spoken about those both beautifully. I think one of the moving meditations that we used to do as monks that I talk about in the book, and I love doing this with clients or people I'm working with, is we'll go on a walk and I'll ask them to find and pick up something that they've never, something that just sparks their interest. It doesn't have to be anything particular. It could be a stone, it could be a pebble, it could be a flower, it could be a leaf, it could be anything that they see. And so they pick something up. And then what I ask them to do on the walk is I ask them to intimately observe it. Every texture, every color, every scent, holding it to your ear and hearing what it sounds like in different parts of your hand. To intimately observe something that you take as mundane or insignificant actually refreshes you and trains your mind to not just seek beauty, but to seek complete experience in everything you're exposed to. And the best thing that happens every time, whether someone picks up a huge rock or whether they pick up a little leaf, they realize that they misjudged how deep and beautiful that thing was. When they first picked it up, they just thought it was this insignificant stone. And when they looked at it, they just realized there was a universe inside that flower. And that is such a refreshing way of doing a moving meditation, because you're walking, you're in nature, you're outdoors, and you're allowing your mind to be truly present. Another way we were tasked to do as monks is we would go on the same walk every day, and we had to discover something new. And so we often asked, for the next 3 days, you're going to find a new flower. Now, the mind would like to play a trick. It would find the first 3 flowers on the first day and be like, oh, I'm prepared for the next 3 days. Because the mind is always trying to be in the future. The mind doesn't want to be in the present. And so what would happen is our teachers would take us out the next day and they'd be like, today we're not looking for a flower. Today we're looking for a butterfly. And all of a sudden, you'd be back at square one. So if you're taking the same route to work every day, what's something new that you haven't seen? If you go into the same office every day, what item can you add or remove from your desk to change the environment? What can you do in these simple ways, which can all be your beginning process of meditation, right? There's the habit, and there's the practice, and then there's the lifestyle. To me, I think if people start with the lifestyle, they'll feel the benefits and the practice will become easier.
That's amazing. I mean, so it's really about mindfulness. I mean, that's what I'm hearing, is it's really about being mindful and present in your work.
Intentional. Yeah, intentional.
We talked about it when I was on your podcast, but we've done 3 brain imaging studies with meditation. And we did the chanting meditation, Kirtan Kriya, a Kundalini yoga form of meditation. And it settled down the emotional brain. And it also, interesting, settled down the parietal lobes, which means you sort of lost your sense of time and space. But then as you continued to do it, it activated your frontal lobes, which means the more thoughtful part of your brain. So now, I called the pandemic a global amygdala hijacking. So the amygdala is that part of our brain that senses fear. And so that's been hijacked, and our frontal lobes have dropped, watching the news, not sleeping. We don't have good frontal lobe function. And what meditation does, it's like the perfect prescription: quiet the amygdala hijacking, activate the prefrontal cortex, so you can just be more thoughtful.
Yeah.
When people medicate with alcohol, with marijuana, with bad food, what they're doing is they're taking the prefrontal cortex offline, and then you get the amygdala rebound when you don't have those things. And just so grateful for you.
Oh, it's so
Think
this is so
Like
good.
a Monk, out
September 8th.
soon, September 8th. We'll release the podcast right
And
around
obviously
that
you
time
can buy this anywhere, right?
to help. But
Yeah,
talk
absolutely.
to us about how people can find you and learn from you
The 5 that don't already know you.
beyond the book. What are the best ways for people to connect with?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have the podcast On Purpose, which is a great place to connect, especially if you're interested in long form content. We have my video channels on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, which are all at Jay Shetty. If someone's really looking to go deeper in their practice and learn, then we have my Genius Coaching Program, which is our monthly coaching program where people can actually connect with people in their local area and be guided. And for those who want to become coaches, we just launched a few months ago our Jay Shetty Coaching School, which is a certified and accredited member to provide life coaching certification. So if someone's really at that stage where they want to go and make an impact themselves, those are all the areas that we currently have to offer. But this, honestly, I'm so glad that you both asked me such practical questions, because I couldn't agree with you more that right now, what we need is to give people tools that can help them build the habits that will help them get through this, but last the long term, right? Like if we can use this time, if everyone listening and watching right now can just use this time to develop habits, these habits are going to be useful for the rest of your lifetime, no matter what the world throws at you. And I loved what you just said about the amygdala hijack. And that's what we need to bring back. And if it's as simple as you to repeat a simple affirmation or a mantra, one of my favorite affirmation is, I'm exactly where I need to be. I say that to myself often because I feel the mind always wants to be in the future or the past. And I always remind myself with my hand on my heart that I'm exactly where I need to be, because there's an experience right now that I'm meant to be having that I'm trying to avoid. And by avoiding that experience, I just have to have it again in the future. So that one really helps me. And then there are beautiful mantras in the Sanskrit language, which I studied as a monk. And there's one that I've been sharing, which is called Sarva Sukhino Bhavantu. And what it means is that may there be love and happiness for every being. And I find like when I add that to my intention and I add that to my prayer or my meditation, it allows me to feel like a small part of the solution, even if I can't change everything.
It's so great. One that has always, I mean, there's so many that help me, but I spent 9 days with Byron Katie, and she's pretty amazing.
Oh, amazing. Yes, she's awesome. I love Byron Katie.
Mind bending, but it was really great. But for me, I can tend to get caught up in triggers from my past, which is why I really worked on prayer and meditation in my life. And one thing that helps me, and maybe it's not a peaceful or a pretty way to say it, but it works. Argue with reality, welcome to hell. And it just reminds me, like I'm arguing with what's real right now. I'm arguing and trying to either go in the past or the future. And I'm not right now. This is my reality right now. And in this moment, I'm fine. Everything's fine.
Do I have everything I need in this moment?
Right.
And almost always.
Yeah.
The answer is yes. Well, my friend, we
so amazing.
love you,
That was
and
so
we're
great.
grateful
Thank
for
you so
you. Can't wait to when we can actually see each other in person. I owe you a brain scan. I'm dying to see your brain.
That was his first line to me. I'd never heard a cooler line. I want to see your naked brain. Like I was like, no one's ever given. That is just the most unique. You have to admit.
Well, I was.
He told that story on the podcast, and I loved it because it's brilliant. I mean, he's Daniel's charming. He's charismatic. He's smart. Like he's just
unique, but he's got game. So.
He's got it all. He's got it all. I love both of you together, and I'm so glad when Daniel shared it on the podcast last time. It was beautiful, and I look forward to it too. I'm sure there's lots of things I can improve about my brain, and I am completely a student. I'm ready to learn and grow.
This was fantastic. Yeah, honestly, I'm so excited to share this with our listeners and our followers.
Thank you, Tana.
My friend. All right. For those who've been listening, this is the Brain Warriors Way podcast. Whatever you learned, so much this week with Jay. Write it down.
And questions.
Post it on any of your social media sites. Hashtag @JShetty. Also hashtag Brain Warriors Way podcast. Leave us a comment, question, or a review. We know you've enjoyed this. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're considering coming to Amen Clinics or trying some of the brain healthy supplements from BrainMD, you can use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or a 10% discount on all supplements at brainmdhealth.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.